90 years in the future, mankind is engaged in a life-or-death struggle against the anti-air race. The war has been going on for decades and with no end in sight. The revs were created, Marines shot up with the strongest performance-enhancing drugs ever made. Rev are like the Incredible Hulk but without the bulk. They are the battering rams of the Corps, whose sole purpose is to use their superhuman bodies to blast open a hole where others can follow. The revs are very good at what they do. Unfortunately, the drugs take a heavy toll on the Marines, turning them into dangerous addicts with no future other than the rev drug NT4. But something is changing in one of the most senior revs, something that no one can understand or deal with, until it's too late.
Limited function biobots, controlled with attractant chemotaxis, are used to temporarily enhance and balance specific hormones in those individuals capable of surviving pre-NT4 screening and training. Successful graduates of the program have life expectancy or length of active duty based on their body's continuing ability to manage the stresses on specific organs.
Dr. Clifford Slater. Basic NT4 Considerations and Contraindications, 3rd edition, 2083.
You okay in there, Gunny?
Gunnery Sergeant Zac Murphy craned his neck so he could see his squad commander, Captain Tom Keller, through the tiny window in the pod.
Snug as a bug, sir,
he replied with a smile.
Anxious to get some alien blood on my hands. It's been a while.
Patience. Another 15 minutes and you'll be neck deep in the stuff.
You promise? Don't be teasing me, sir. You know what happens when I get mad.
The last sentence was a standing joke within the unit, and one based more on reality than bravado.
Just keep it pointed in the right direction, Sergeant, and I'll be happy?
Yes, sir.
Zac was ensconced inside an 8-meter-long by 3-meter-wide pod called an ejection capsule, locked down, plugged in 5 minutes from drop. Through the narrow viewport inches from his face, he glimpsed men from the RU, the recovery unit, loading into a landing shuttle in the next station over. They would follow him to the surface only minutes behind. After that, the main Marine force would sweep in through the breach, if there was a breach, and do the cleanup. Nothing like having the weight of the entire operation riding on your shoulders. Captain Keller was encased in his battle armor as well, ready to lead the RU. He leaned in closer to the window.
30 seconds to initial boost. 3 minutes to drop.
Zac nodded as best he could inside his battle helmet. The gray metal headrest was secured to the form-fitting body cushion lining the back of the capsule, so it was only his head that moved. His movements were also restricted by the thin, fused metal collar he wore around his neck, which would administer the drugs as the mission proceeded. It also contained his battle computer. There were 4 tiny cameras embedded in the collar, 2 looking forward and 2 back. They would transmit real-time video of the run, both for operational archives and debrief. He also had thin transducer wires plugged into the back of his skull, allowing subconscious instructions to be relayed should they become necessary. On a conscious level, he would be oblivious to the commands, but his instincts would obey. At least to a point. The computer would also track his ammo usage and signal the various stages of the assault. 2 other men appeared outside the capsule, crowding out the Marine officer, each waving one-finger salutes through the thick plate glass viewport. Captain Keller grinned and gave them the right of way.
Semper Fi, mofo,
they yelled in unison.
Don't let your wheelchair get in the way, old man. You're a pitiful excuse for a Marine. Your mama should have drowned you at birth. I thought she did.
You sick bastards.
Zac shot back.
Just wait until I get back. There'll be some major ass whooping when I do.
Corporal Danny Gaines and Staff Sergeant Manny Hernandez waved their hands in mock horror.
Watch out, Jug,
Hernandez said.
He might come back and beat us over the head with his cane.
This was a ritual all revs followed. A promise to return from the near-suicidal run to the safety of the ship, if only to seek revenge for the insults. It was all good-natured taunting in the face of incredible danger. There were only 3 revs aboard the huge battle carrier Olympus, making for a small, tight-knit group with their own rituals and nomenclature. Danny was the jogger. Jog. A rookie with less than 10 runs to his name. Manny had a couple of dozen under his belt and was called Bolt. Zac was the most senior of the small cadre. He was a ram, having earned his horns long before the other 2 even joined the Corps. Zac felt a slight pinch on the back of his neck as the first of the pre-drugs was administered, a variant of dopamine and other proprietary ingredients. A feeling of calm swept over him. He looked out at his companions with a silly grin on his face.
He's gone,
Manny said, as the humor vanished from his voice and expression. Captain Keller returned to the view plate.
Confirm status.
He ordered solemnly.
Status green. Standing by.
Zac mumbled. Keller nodded. This initial injection was just the warm-up, something to make the ride to the surface more bearable. Once on the planet, he'd get the good stuff. And that's when the real show would begin. A panel in the bulkhead spiraled open and the EC slid inside. It was pitch black in the chamber, with the only light coming from the dim heads-up display that flashed on once the capsule was placed in the launch tube. Zac was alone now. He wasn't afraid or apprehensive. He preferred it this way. It was safer for everyone involved.
Drop in 10,
said Keller's voice through the comm speakers in Zac's helmet.
Good luck, Gunny. See you on the other side.
Roger that, sir.
Zac was feeling giddy now, as if he didn't have a care in the world. The air was suddenly sucked out of his lungs as the tiny pod shot from the side of the battle carrier. It received a major acceleration boost from the mag rails before falling of its own accord through the thin upper atmosphere of ES-8. Tiny air jets controlled the angle of entry, and moments later, the view through the pressure window was streaked with brilliant torrents of yellow and red flame. The drugs in Zac's system helped him endure the 9G entry and violent buffeting taking place without passing out or losing his lunch. Even then, this was his 104th drop, and if it wasn't for the brief duration of the transit, he would have fallen asleep on the ride down. 4 minutes later, the assault capsule entered the lower atmosphere and began to slow down. Stubby wings extended from the fuselage, providing more control for the transition toward the landing zone. It would be early morning at the LZ, 2 hours before sunrise. Even so, it was a good bet the QN were already tracking his approach. Any minute now they would send a variety of flak in his direction. The threat avoidance system of the EC was one of the most advanced, and in all the history of orbital drops of this sort, only 24 had been taken out by enemy countermeasures prior to landing. Out of over 2,000 sorties, that wasn't a bad percentage. Unfortunately, Zac had known 7 of the revs who bought it, so he was aware that at any time his check could get cashed. Hell, even aliens got lucky now and then. The pod suddenly shifted course to avoid a series of roiling balls of plasma lifting up from the surface. Zac gnashed his teeth and took in a few quick breaths to compensate for the extreme G-forces that slammed his body from side to side in his restrictive container. Then, within a second, the pod dropped straight down several thousand feet, pulling Zac's stomach into his throat. The landing drugs were good, but even they had limits. Blood trickled from Zac's nose and splattered on the faceplate of his helmet. Sensors detected the obstruction, and a chemical agent on the glass burned away the red liquid. Zac watched with almost hypnotic intensity as the concentric squares on the HUD cycled relentlessly toward the LZ. The pod jogged again, following a jagged course toward the ground, dancing between ballistic balls of fire sent from the surface. 2 more contacts appeared, causing alarms to sound within the capsule. These were tracking missiles and much harder to avoid. Zac often wondered why alarms were needed to warn him of the weapons. He was at the mercy of the pod's guidance computer and helpless to do anything to affect its course. Perhaps the alarms were there to let him know he was in some really deep shit now, rather than just your ordinary run-of-the-mill shallow shit. The evasive maneuvers became even more abrupt and erratic, as the computer directed diversionary countermeasures to explode from the surface of the pod. Most were tiny drones, designed to mimic the signature of the entry capsule. Others carried heat sources which would ionize the nearby atmosphere and confuse the pressure readers on the ground and in the missiles. The missiles changed course, leaving the EC falling even faster toward the surface. Once Zac dropped below 5,000 feet, the capsule would be safe from this particular type of defensive system. After that, everything sent by the Quinn would be aimed at him personally. As the capsule dropped lower, Zac knew the time was near. He readied himself for the change. Unlike the entry drug, Zac didn't feel the NT4 when it was injected into his system. That was the idea, no feelings at all. But for a moment he was aware of its presence. A jolt of electric energy and savage strength surged through every part of his body as his biology cascaded, so all-consuming and frenetic that it evoked the primal scream endemic to revs everywhere. Through the comm, the Marines on the orbiting battle carrier heard the blood-curdling shriek. At that moment, Gunnery Sergeant Zac Murphy was no longer the man they'd known only a few minutes before. He was now a rev. The landing came with an abrupt deceleration as the pod shifted orientation to a steep 45-degree angle. Just as the bottom skids contacted the surface, two sharp titanium blades extended below the capsule, designed to plow into the soil and slow the vehicle. A huge cloud of dust and dirt marked the passage of the EC as it chewed through small hills and fields of grass and dark soil. The parallel tracks left by the blades pointed directly at a large dam and hydroelectric conversion complex holding back a massive lake. It had once provided power to the alien city 15 clicks away, which spanned a wide valley between two modest rows of grassy hills. If Zac had awareness, he would have found the scene pleasing, even tranquil. As it was, he felt no such emotion. All he felt was rage. Even before the cloud of dust could catch up to the pod, the forward section blew off, sending Zac soaring into the air. With the momentum of the landing and the force of his ejection, he reached the grassy surface next to a drainage river already in full stride, sprinting across the star-lit ground in a blur. His right arm was encased in an M93 auto-pulse rifle and on his left, a Mod 9 grenade flamethrower unit. When added to his body armor and natural weight, Zac carried a load of just under 500 pounds. The field around him exploded in geysers of gunfire as the Q-1 released round after round in his direction from defensive batteries placed along the higher levels of the dam. The matte gray of his armor and the electronic jammers in his collar made him a hard target to track, allowing him to deftly dodge the incoming fire. He covered the remaining 180 meters of open terrain in 9 seconds flat. A week before, the aliens had abandoned the nearby city, left in ruins and darkened by the Q-1's savage revenge against their once loyal NF followers who now sided with the humans. They occupied the settlement initially, until ships from Earth arrived and began flooding the streets with killer drones and raining bombardments down on them from space. The vast size of the power plant, along with miles of internal passageways within the dam, offered protection and a base of operations as the aliens and their remaining native allies regrouped. It was Zac's job to make sure they didn't get too comfortable in their new surroundings. As he approached the barricaded entrance to the sprawling complex, he sighted a squad of Quinn and Enif flanking the main gate. Q-90s mounted on tripods whirled in his direction. Zac lifted the Mod 9 and launched 4 grenades at the alien positions while continuing his headlong race to the gate. That was the purpose of a run. Not to stop. His job was to penetrate enemy lines and create chaos within the ranks, prompting a panicked retreat. The main Marine force would then pour in and herd the enemy farther into their hideout. There they would be trapped or attempt to escape into space. Waiting buzz ships would do the cleanup after that. But it was Zac's job to get the ball rolling. He was at the gate by the time the grenades exploded, taking out the defensive units. The exterior security force was insignificant compared to what was about to hit them in the form of an activated rev. Not every assault was led by a rev, but now that Zac was on the surface, the news would spread quickly and strategies would change. Zac lowered his shoulder and barreled through the gate like it wasn't there. Within the open grounds outside the main generator building, other aliens had quickly assembled an interior defense line behind concrete barricades. There were about 100 of them, all Q-1 and experienced fighters from the look of their organized formation. Zac's HUD detected the heat signatures of the aliens as his mind locked in their locations. The performance-enhancing drug coursing through his system improved memory, even as his body and mind operated on autopilot. As it was with most advanced savants, they didn't have to think about solutions to complex equations. The answers simply appeared to them. Under the influence of NT4, it was the same with Zac. He was operating on pure instinct. Conscious thought would have only slowed him down. Now his blistering eye-hand coordination did all the work. Without realizing it, his M93 was spitting white-hot lead at the Q-1. His reaction time was faster than anything other than full computer assist, but that required a stationary platform and a full array of detectors to operate efficiently. Zac didn't need any outside help. And he was also mobile, almost too mobile for the aliens to follow. He swept the area with his weapon, sending shattered and bloodied body parts exploding into the air. In 6 seconds, the area was clear of enemy combatants. He detected 2 wounds to his body, one along the outer thigh of his right leg, and another on his left shoulder. Most of his armor was still intact, and neither injury impeded his attack in the slightest, so he ignored them offhand. The remaining Q-1 retreated into the main building leading to the dam running under huge pipes and conduits and around towering circular generators. Zac didn't hesitate and followed them inside. Although still locked together and operational, his armor was becoming pitted with dents from the alien ballistics, and occasionally his electronics would flicker from a strike of plasma energy. The suit was designed to withstand such punishment and to counter any electrical overloads, but like all things, it had its limits. Within the interior of the complex, those limits would be tested. Zac was much faster than the fleeing aliens, even with his heavy pack, and soon he was blasting the creatures at point-blank range as he ran by. This particular squad, the remaining force from outside, was soon neutralized, leaving the units farther in the complex to form up defensive lines in the cavernous energy distribution area within the dam. This was where the main conduits joined, allowing the natives to control the production and distribution of power to the city. There were ample hiding places for the QN, and they seemed to have every one of them utilized. Zac unleashed a combined stream of thick, yellow flame from one arm and the relentless scream of lead from his M93 on the other, covering a full 180 degrees of the room in front of him. He took more fire himself but shrugged it off. There would be time enough to heal after the run, if he survived it. The aliens broke off and ran deeper into the complex. Zac followed, easily overtaking the runners while barreling through hastily constructed barricades and defenses. The Quinn could barely turn over a table to hide behind before Zac was upon them. Seeing this, most of the aliens no longer bothered. They just ran.
What the hell is he doing?
Lieutenant Colonel Paul Owens cried out. He ran up beside Captain Tom Keller. Both officers had running data streams on their HUDs chronicling the progress of the run. Keller knew what Owens was referring to. 2 clicks.
I know.
He huffed as he ran.
Time at 7 minutes 45.
At that pace, he'll outrun his RU and his backup. Maybe less resistance.
Not according to mission stats. Rate of fire and tentative body count puts this at 1, the highest.
Tom placed a small quadrant screen on his HUD and linked it to one of Zac's collar video monitors. The Rev was still blasting forward, killing aliens and moving forward through wide hallways and into cavernous workrooms. The aliens were everywhere, although most of the ones Keller could see on the screen were dead. He checked the distance to target. 0.4 of a click and increasing. Zac was running away from his support team and deeper into enemy territory. At the 10-minute mark, Zac was 2.9 clicks into the complex, having run the full width of the dam and into tunnels placed within the solid rock of the opposite mountain wall and a full click ahead of the RU. He could be Twilighted any time between now and 12 minutes into the run, depending on his vitals. Keller scanned them on his HUD. The bastard was all in the green. This one was going the distance. Suddenly, Zac stopped. The view on Keller's HUD showed Zac stand upright and rigid before toppling to the ground. The camera view was static, pointing ahead at ground level at a large, dark passageway 40 feet away. Keller checked Zac's readouts. It wasn't the Twilight, and neither was he dead. All indicators were still in the green. The Marine captain saw dozens of Q-Win rush from the shadows, all converging on Zac. The aliens knew what was happening, or at least they thought they did. Here was a Twilighted Rev with his backup woefully behind. They would rip Zac to shreds. Just then, flares of gunfire erupted from Zac's M93. The line of fire raked across the advancing line, literally cutting the aliens in half at the waistline. Dozens died in an instant, while sending the few survivors racing for cover. The camera angle shifted as Zac got to his feet and began to follow. The 2 Marine officers exchanged baffled looks before rejoining their running troops. Zac noticed something odd about his left arm. It wasn't working anymore. He felt no pain, just the drag on his body from the now useless flamethrower and grenade launcher dangling at his side. His battle computer triggered a release lever on the left arm of his suit. The armor fell away, along with the armament, lightening his load and allowing him to gain an ounce more speed. He sprinted through another long tunnel and into a large chamber before racing across toward an opening where the aliens were running. Then he heard the 3 chimes. Even in his frenzied state, instinct continued to guide his actions. He didn't think what the chimes meant, he just reacted to them. They were the 5-second warning before Twilight. With a Pavlov-like reaction to the sound, Zac set about clearing the area of all living things, expending round after round in a deadly circle of fire around where he stood. He still had a few rounds left when his body suddenly went rigid again and fell to the ground. Second, and Sir Basnovin watched the human creature fall to the floor of the chamber. He turned to his cadre and warned them back. The crazed killing machine had done this earlier, and this could be yet another deception. He peered to the other side of the chamber, watching and listening for signs of other humans. In normal circumstances, they would be there, rushing forth to secure their fallen weapon. Yet there was only silence, punctuated by the baying of Basno's wounded and dying all around. This killer had acted differently, resulting in another sub-cadre being slaughtered. Basno was taking no chances. He signaled for 4 of his troops to flank the creature to the right. He would crawl through the cover of the many bodies on the floor and approach from the left, hoping his faith in the order would protect him. The going was sickening as he moved through the pools of blood and sinew that had once been his cadre companions. With each Olin he moved, the desire grew within him to sever a piece of the human beast for his collection, especially this one. This beast had killed more ant-hair than any he'd seen before. But now he lay inert on the concrete, an inviting target, if possibly a deceptive one. A loud blast of gunfire startled Basno from his reverie. He glanced to his right to see his 4 CAD squad cut to pieces. He glared back at the creature the humans called a rev, snarling as he did. Yet the body still lay unconscious on the floor. More gunfire. And this time Basno identified the source, as human fighters entered the chamber from the far side. Glancing back, he saw his other cadre scurrying away, deeper into the complex. He was alone. Grabbing a half-torso and blown-off arm of one of his companions, Basno covered himself with the carcass. He would not get out of the chamber alive. That was evident. As such, his last duty to the order was to exterminate the highest-ranking enemy officer he could locate. He pulled his weapon in close to his body, looking ahead of him at the unconscious Rev warrior. Senior officers would come to him, they always did. And that would be when Basno committed his final act of devotion to his race. Members of the recovery unit ran up to Zac and surrounded him, as hundreds of armored Marines poured into the chamber and rushed off after the fleeing Quen. Captain Tom Keller was one of the first to arrive at Zac's side. Still panting from the long and fast run, he dropped to his knees and cradled Zac's bloody head in his hands. Half the helmet was shattered, and there was a long, angry gash along Zac's right cheek. His left arm was a bruised and bloody sock of shattered bones, and from the double holes in his left leg, Tom wondered how he could stand, let alone carry out a run of devastating effectiveness. The med crew laid out a stabilizing gurney. It was designed to roll over bodies and other obstacles while providing a level ride for the patient. It also had a variety of drugs and plasma containers built into the rails. This was the critical period, when the level of NT4 had to be brought down as quickly as possible before the rev burned out. But it was also NT4 that allowed the body to function at such high levels. The Twilight drug helped, as did the other drug cocktail soon to be administered. The catch-22 was obvious. How much drug to keep in the system to help him survive? But the med techs knew their job. They asked a couple of the other Marines to help them lift him onto the gurney. "Is he still alive?" one of the Marines asked. A med tech had already slapped a couple of Wi-Fi monitors to his chest and temple and was tracking his vitals.
Still ticking. Pulse strong, EEG active. He's twilighted, but his mind is working. Probably still on the run in his mind, killing more aliens.
"Aura," the Marine called out, which was picked up by several others within earshot.
Knock it off,
Keller ordered.
Get him out of here and to the staging area. He's got a lot of healing to do. Let's get him started ASAP.
Keller stood up and watched his 12-person EU crew move Zac's unconscious body from the chamber. He glanced around the room. The floor was covered with the bodies of alien dead. It had been like this all along the course of the run. This is one for the record books, he thought. Then his eyes locked on those of another. The alien was staring at him, with no signs of pain or anguish on his pale yellow face. Instead, his eyes were cold and sober, with even a slight grin on his face. Pop, pop. Keller jumped at the sound. For a moment he sensed his body, trying to tell if he'd been shot. That wasn't always evident right away, and from the wicked look on the alien's face, he wouldn't be surprised to find a bloody hole in his body somewhere, disguised by shock.
"I got him, Captain,"
yelled a young Marine. He was part of the main brigade under Owen's command, so Tom didn't know his name.
"Fucker had a bead on you too, sir."
The barrel of the M101 was still aimed at the dead alien on the floor.
Thank you, Marine. Well done.
Keller's knees were like rubber. That was close.
Grab a couple of your buddies and check the others. No more surprises.
"Yes, sir."
The Marines, along with a generous helping of Army Rangers, were in the process of landing in a steady stream of shuttlecraft, filling up most of the wide plain outside the complex. Mobile assault vehicles MAVs, with mounted 80s, were forming up and preparing to enter the complex. Captain Tom Keller was always impressed with the speed and efficiency of the securing procedure and how so much equipment and personnel could be dropped on a surface of an alien world and immediately set to work. It made him proud to be a Marine, but his distraction was fleeting. A large medical shuttle was already on the surface with Zac inside. Before experiencing the various stresses associated with transition to orbit, Zac had to be checked out thoroughly and stabilized. It wouldn't do to have a fractured rib slice through the chest cavity during a period of turbulence or rapid acceleration. The shuttle had all the facilities aboard to keep Zac alive, if it was possible. Colonel Owens intercepted him as he was entering the shuttle.
"How's your patient, Tom?"
he asked. Keller had his battle helmet tucked under his left arm, so he had no access to the HUD and its link to Zac's vitals.
He's alive. That's about all I know. What's the initial mission, Sitrep?
Owens let out a loud breath.
"Your boy racked up another 600+ kills. The remaining QN and a few of their devoted followers tried to get out along the mountain ridge to the south. Looks like about 50 prisoners. The rest are KIA.
Aura,
Keller said half-heartedly. He loved the idea of a shitload of dead aliens, but at the moment he was more concerned with Zac.
Aura,
Owens repeated. He looked hard at Keller.
"You know we'll have to get to the bottom of this."
Keller nodded. Colonel Owens pulled out a datapad and turned it on.
The revs never stop during a run, unless their mobility is affected. Murphy was on the ground for 17 seconds without moving. How is that even possible while activated?
I don't know, but you're right. We need answers, and the only person who has them is in the shuttle fighting for his life. I'll ask him, if he survives.
This has been an excerpt from my book, Rev, the first volume in the Rev Warriors series by T.R. Harris. You can continue the adventures of Zac Murphy by checking out the full novel and 10-book series on Amazon. See the links under the channel description. More passages from within this book, and many others, are posted on this channel on a regular basis. Be sure to check back often to see all the new HFY sci-fi adventures I'm premiering. Also, you can find all my 70+ novels on Amazon, or by going to my website at bytrharris.com. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button. Your support is greatly appreciated. For almost 13 years, I have been writing HFY material, being one of the first authors to do so. Of course, at the time, I didn't know they were HFY stories. My books portray humans as the supermen and women of the galaxy, the ones to be respected and feared. My goal is to prove that every person on Earth is a Superman or Superwoman, simply because they're human. It should give all my readers a reason to stand up and pump their fists into the air. After all, the saying goes, humanity. Fuck yeah. All story material on this channel was written by author T.R. Harris. Associated artwork and synthetic voices were created through AI. Copyright by Tom Harris Creations, LLC.